Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jake. You can also call me Atrocious, and today we've got the finals of the Spring 3-on-3 Wave 1 in OP07. This tournament has been really fun so far. Really interesting matches through the first couple rounds. If you haven't seen those videos yet, make sure to go check those out on the channel. Some exciting matches for you all. And today in the finals, we got these two teams here. The team on the left, this is the red team. They've got, essentially, what am I saying? This is almost a mirror match. This is almost an identical mirror match as we've seen prior. Let me go back in the recording and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. We already know the matchup because you've seen the title in the thumbnail and I kind of previewed it in the last video. It's going to be the Red Purple Law mirror match. Not super surprising to me that Red Purple Law has two spots in the top tables because, well, it's a really good deck. The same goes as Black Yellow Luffy, as both teams running Black Yellow Luffy and a majority of teams running both Black Yellow Luffy and Red Purple Law. And then this more flex spot, the 3 spot, this team playing the Gecko Moira, which I believe is who we saw previously. And then the team on the right side, the blue team playing Anel, which I also think we watched previously. As you could have figured out, I am going to be watching the recording. I do not own any of this content. This is the official championships. If you want to go check this out for yourself, link will be in the description below. But for those of you that want to hear me yap away, let's get into the match here in a moment. Now, there's different ways that we've seen this deck piloted, the Red Purple Law. There's a lot of the cards that revolve around the same, but there are some discrepancies. One of the big things that we saw in the previous match is the impact of the Miss All Sunday. Miss All Sunday was awesome in the match against the Zoro, and in my opinion, was the reason that they ended up winning that game. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen round 1 of this tournament that we covered on the channel. But going into this one, we'll see exactly how the decks are. We've seen one of the players before, and then the other one I don't believe we've seen on stream yet. But just because we've seen one on stream before doesn't mean that we know their full deck list at this time. That doesn't mean that we've seen every single tech card that they could have. I would imagine that if you're Red Purple Law, you probably have something in for the mirror. And remember, Red Purple Law's leader effect, we're going to go over this for anyone who is curious. An activate main once per turn, done -3. You can put a 3,000 power or less character on your opponent's side of the field at the bottom of their deck, and whether you do or not, more so just when you put in the Dawn, after you go through the supposed bottom decking stage, you can put a 4 cost or less on the field from your hand, so able to cheat out specific characters. So the player on the right is going first in this one. Looking at this, we got a Bon Clay, Otama. I'm speaking on the left side right now, as it looks like they're going to mulligan right here. So we'll focus on the player on the right. The player on the right, I see a Bon Clay in there, Sachi and Penguin, Zoro Juro. I think they have 2 Bon Clays actually in hand, and a Eustace Captain Kid blocker. Yes, I was correct. 2 Bon Clays in the hand. Bon Clay, something that we saw come out in EB01 out here in the West and has been instrumental to the deck in its uprising into one of the best decks in the meta. Going to be really interesting. Seems like a pretty decent hand, right? A lot of ramp cards with the Zoro Juro, the Bon Clays, the Sachi Penguin, a bunch of cards that you can use as targets on your leader effect. It'll be interesting with the Bon Clays though, because the Bon Clays are easy targets to be able to bottom deck from the opponent. So the player on the left doing the mulligan, and this is their starting hand. 2 Eins from that film starter deck. You got the Queen blocker right there, a Reiju from OP06, and a Zoro Juro. So honestly, like, not terrible hands both sides. You get a little worried as the player on the left with multiple non-counter cards in the Eins, but could be instrumental. I do think, honestly, though, the player on the right does have slight advantage, having something like the Eustace Captain Kid. Very, very good in the matchup, simply because every time that kid is on the field and you do a Dawn minus effect, you'll be able to get one back as active, so effectively ramping a ton. Player on the right going first, just passing after the Dawn and drawing the new Sanji from OP07. We saw a little bit of its impact in the last match, but a draw passes going for the player on the left. Player on the right is immediately going to go ahead, swing 5 at lead, going to be taking that. It's a Reiju and playing that Zorojuro. If that Zorojuro sticks, if you have 3 life or less, add up to 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. Really, really good when you have a 4 life leader. And so looking around, going to be countering out of that with a Bon-chan right there. And then player on the left using an Ainz to ramp a Dawn, go up to 5. So a really fickle mirror match in my opinion, because of like really wanting to maximize your resources, and then obviously manipulating Dawn for things like Reiju and stuff like that can be really interesting. So player on the right side just going ahead and playing the kid down, and then after playing the kid using leader effect, not to bottom deck but to play the Sachian Penguin, and then through the kid leader effect get 1 active Dawn back to stay kind of at 5 overall. Attaching that Dawn swinging 6 is going to take a life. It's going to be a Bon-chan right there and a pass off to the player on the left. So now player on the left drawing a kid blocker. The kid blocker, very, very nice. You love to see that right there, as they're at 7 Dawn overall. Kind of thinking about what they want to do in this one. You do need to start establishing a little bit of a board, maybe trying to use a little bit of ramp cards, especially at 7 Dawn right now. Your opponent is at 5. You have too many cards in hand, really, as well as a little bit too much Dawn in terms of being able to maximize Reiju. Reiju can fulfill the Dawn effect if you use the Dawn minusing effect, but the cards in hand is a little bit too much. You've been taking a lot of life really quickly. So starting off with a 5k swing with lead over to the right side. The right side only has 3 cards in hand. I didn't even realize how fast they lost cards in hand. Only a Queen, a Zorojuro, and a Bon Clay. So a little bit of counter, thankfully, overall, but going to have to be taking this live. That Zoro now on the field. That Zorojuro is going to be active for its Dawn plussing effect to be able to get an active Dawn now at this point. And the Ainz likely maybe taking another life as well, potentially. So going to be resting 5, probably playing this kid to get 1 of their own on the field. Always a good idea. Going to be using that Dawn minus effect to play down a Bon-chan. And so the ramp from the Bon-chan and then the ramp from the Uses Captain Kid blocker effect is going to get them 2 Dawn back to go to 6. And then playing the 1 right there, going to be another Ainz to be able to ramp the Dawn with the rest of the Dawn that you have left after the active comes back. So going into the player on the left now, interesting that they didn't swing with that Ainz overall, probably just recognizing that, hey, I can't make it a 6k body and you have a 6k blocker on the field, so there's no use to swinging at it. I don't want a body to leave the field of mine. And so now with your opponent at 7 Dawn at this point, you are tied in Dawn now, 7-7 entirely, as they draw into that Reiju. The Reiju, they would be able to draw off of it, right? Off of the Dawn minusing effect to get that on the field, because you will fulfill that requirement. Could be interesting to potentially play down another one of these characters. You could see the Shiraya come down. Shiraya, a really, really good card. Maybe not so much in this mirror match, but could be interesting to say the least. So thinking about 5, maybe thinking about playing the Queen. The Queen with that Dawn minus effect. You'll get that Dawn back from the Eustace Captain Kid, and you'll be able to draw cards out of your deck. Maybe getting a better option than Reiju in your mind, than the or to be able to play down than the Reiju. So sectioning off 4, maybe thinking about playing the Bon-chan, maybe the Bon-chan and the Shiraya, and then maybe using Reiju off of the leader effect to bottom deck the Bon-chan. That wouldn't be too bad of an idea. You definitely don't want that Mr. 2 Bon Clay copying any of your characters for some free extra power, especially with that use as Captain Kidd on the field. So maybe even thinking about attaching some Dawn to the Zorojuro and swinging. The Zorojuro swinging with a ton of Dawn would be interesting, as this is going to be a 6k swing, because that Zorojuro does have a 4k base power. And really thinking about what they want to do right now. Still at 6 Dawn now after that Zorojuro effect proctors, since they're at 3 or less life, getting a Dawn as active from their Dawn deck, going to have 6 more to work with overall. And so now forcing a 2k, it's going to be that 2k Sanji blocker that we were talking about earlier. Yes, that Sanji has 2k, going to be resting 5 potentially on this. They're sectioning off 5. They're thinking either, I think, Shiraya, Bonchan, or the Queen, and it looks like Queen's not going to be an option at this point because they attach 2 Dawn to the Sachin Penguin, going to be swinging 7 overall right now. The player on the left has 5 in hand, going to be taking that life and getting a Zorojuro. A lot of these red purple law decks not playing any triggers, no fire fists or anything like that, so not really ever seeing a trigger at any point. And so now going in and using the leader effect to put 3 Dawn back, going to be bottom decking that Bonchan because it hasn't been able to copy anything and is a 1k body. Going to be playing off that leader effect the Reiju, and with less Dawn and only 4 cards in hand, he'll go ahead and draw 2, then use the Kid effect to get back up to 5. So with 5, going to be attaching 2 and swinging 7 with lead, more than likely playing the Shiraya at the end of this turn, or maybe even playing a Zorojuro if you're not afraid of getting hit by lethal in this upcoming turn. Swinging 7 at lead, going to need to counter out a little bit if they want to survive in this one. Maybe even utilizing the 3 Dawn to be able to battle with the Kid if they feel like, if they, you know, block and maybe use a little bit of counter to save the Kid, right? Because you would have to use 2k to save off of the block, or 3k overall to save a life. So could be an interesting situation overall, I will say. Off of the Reiju draw, they did find a Gordon. Gordon going to be really, really nice potentially next turn to get rid of the Kid blocker. You don't get any more blockers up. Well, all of my characters are going to swing free as I use that Gordon. The Raise Max. They do the same exact thing. Going to be blocking, like I mentioned earlier, and getting 2 1Ks to get out of that and keep that Kid alive. Now, this player has to think about what they want to do. They could swing their own Kid into the rested Kid blocker to get a little bit of battle, maybe get some cards out of their hand. It looks like that is what they're going to do. While playing the Shiraya after this could be a decent idea to maybe protect the Kid a little bit, and going to be swinging 6, it looks like at lead. It could be at lead. If you do swing at lead, it does force potentially another card if they don't have a 2k, whereas if you swung into the Kid blocker, you would have to force only a 1k. So thinking about what they want to do at this point, thinking about pitching 2 cards. The Reiju is really nice because the Reiju is going to be able to draw you cards, right, to be able to find more counter and such in this fight. But you still have 1 life left, so you could potentially take this life. People are not running things like Monkey D. Luffy anymore in their red purple law list, that unblockable Luffy from starter deck 1. So I don't necessarily think it's something that you really have to worry about. You worry more about stuff like the Killer and Kid and such. So really looking around to do what, just taking that life right there and playing that Shiraya. So Going in now with 0 life at this point. They do find another kid off of the life and the Sanji right there. If you are at less 2 or fewer Dawn than your opponent, then the Sanji only costs 3 overall. So you gotta think that that 6k blocker is in the mind of the player on the left to potentially play in this game. And think about this as well. When you play a second Eustace Captain Kid, what you're going to be able to do every time you use a Dawn minus effect is you're going to be able to get more Dawn back. So using the Queen, using the Dawn minus effect, drawing 2 cards right there, it's going to be 2 more blockers, another Queen, and another Eustace Captain Kid. They do have to discard 1 card. All of their cards, I think, have counter card, if I'm not mistaken. Even that 5 cost right there, because they have multiple kids in hand. So getting rid of the Bonchan, saying, you know what, I don't really need the ramp overall, and then using the kid effect to get back up to 5. So the kid might be played as well at this point to be able to get another blocker on the field. But first, they're going to start out by swinging 5. Going to be taking out that Zoro, just trying to clear bodies at this point. Maybe do a little bit of starving. You know, the less swings that you can see going into this next turn, the more in favor that you can be just chipping away at them slowly. So I would imagine that this is going to be swung at the Sachi and Penguin right there with this Ainz, and so going to be forcing a 1k counter. I think the Zoro is an excellent option to use off of the 1k counter because you don't really need him anymore at this stage of the game. It is a when swinging, it's really an on curve kind of situation or early game situation. You're far enough in the game to where you play your other bodies overall. So thinking about now, maybe if they want to swing with this Ainz at this point, got 4 cards in hand, going to be swinging this Ainz, depending on where it is exactly. I'm not sure. It could be at lead, could be at the Sachi and Penguin. Still a 1k counter both ways, and so counting up their Dawn, trying to think about what they want to do in their future turns. If they get rid of this card, do they need it overall? I think they're really thinking about the Bon Clay, that Mr. 2 right there. Really thinking, is this a card that I really want to discard, right? The ramp, really, really effective, even though it gets bottom decked very easily, almost instantaneously. And thinking about what their opponents, the player on the left's turn, looks like the next time that they're up, or what they could play for the rest of this turn. It looks like that Ein swing is at the Sachi and Penguin, and it looks like he's thinking about letting this Sachi and Penguin go in this. So really thinking about now where they're at with the 5 Dawn. It wouldn't surprise me to see another kid come down almost defensively. Thinking about swinging this kid, I don't know if you want to swing the kid. You have a good amount of counter in hand, but I don't know if you want to do that necessarily. Maybe just playing a little bit more defensively overall. You can use leader effect after you play the kid to put down something like the Sanji, and going to be swinging overall. Actually, does the Sanji technically in your hand, this card costs 3 less, so it does work overall through the leader effects. So going to be the Bon Clay countered on that kid, and going to be using leader effect at this point to play the Reiju. The Reiju is going to draw 2 cards because they had 5 in hand and less Dawn, and now going to be resting 5 for a kid, I would assume, right? You're going to rest 5 for a kid. Thinking about what they want to replace overall, maybe not resting the 5 Dawn, saying, you know what, maybe I don't want to reset, maybe I don't want to get rid of any of these characters overall. You did draw a Sachi and Penguin off of that Reiju, so that's nice to get a 2k, and you found a Gordon as well in the same situation that I was talking about with the player on the right's raise max. So player on the left having nice card advantage, but with 0 life left, you really got to think about what you want to do. So playing down that kid right there, passing the turn off to the opponent and going into the next turn. Player on the left now going to be at 2, 4, 6. Oh man, it's so hard to see. Looks like it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8 Dawn, it looks like at this point. There's a Miss All Sunday, a card that we were talking about earlier. Miss All Sunday, no counter on that card, but will be able to draw you a card at least and gets another Dawn rested to be able to better utilize your leader effects. So thinking about what they want to do right now, again, they need to get rid of some blockers in order to go for game overall. Going to be attaching 2 and swinging 7 at lead. That's 7k swing at lead. Going to need either a blocker and 2 cards or 3 cards from hand, and it looks like it's going to be 2 cards, the Sachian Penguin, and uses Captain Kidd blocker for 8,000 power to counter out of the 7,000 power swing. So now still with several Dawn at this point. 6 Dawn, it looks like, overall. A 6 Dawn, maybe thinking about the Gordon or Raise Max, whatever that card is. Get the Raise Max on the field. Maybe bottom deck one of these characters, or maybe thinking about attaching one of the Dawn to the Reiju and swinging with the Reiju, right? A lot of these 6k blockers on the field right now. The Queen, the uses Captain Kidd. The Reiju swinging 5 would just be a simple block overall. So if you do want to bottom deck one of these characters, the Raise Max is going to help you get there, but it also could just be really good for just trying to get rid of a body in KO. Overall, the strategy that you can use that maybe not a lot of players think about is using Raise Max to, for instance, minus 3,000 on the rested uses Captain Kidd and then swing at a 3,000 power body. Potentially could be able to KO it a lot easier, not have your opponent use up all the counter cards and force them to make a decision. And so really just thinking about the potential possibilities overall in this championship final. Looks like with the 5 could be either playing Queen or the Miss All Sunday. It looks like the Queen is the choice. I don't mind this play if it's the Queen, because even though you Dawn minus, you get that Dawn right back and you get to draw 2 cards as well and trash one of your non-counter cards, which is more than likely the Miss Wednesday right here. So Miss Wednesday being taken out, as much as I love that card in this deck, not going to be seen at this point, in favor of some 2k counter in the Otama and then a 1k in the Zorojuro. Going to be attaching one of the Dawn and swinging 6 overall. Thinking, what are they going to do with this last Dawn? Are they going to play the Raise Max as they use a 2k counter to get out of that swing, not using one of the blockers? And they'll use the Raise Max, lower the active use this Captain Kidd, and then use the Dawn minus effect to get rid of that kid overall and play the Zorojuro. The Zorojuro is going to be really nice to be able to get an active Dawn in the next turn, but you did have to get rid of a 1k counter in hand. But does that 1k counter matter overall? With 5 bodies now to swing, no rush characters here, and you have a little bit of a safety net with the Queen. How much Dawn do you have? I forgot to count. I was too busy looking at their hand right now. I think they have 8 Dawn overall at this point. So really just a battle of the Dawn management in this game so far. Could do a similar play with a Queen and then a Gordon effect on the left side, going into the right, getting rid of one of the blockers. Going to start out by swinging 5 at the Reiju and getting rid of it there. Really just doing a lot of focusing on getting rid of bodies. That Reiju is going to go down instantly. And then the 5k swing going and taking life, a non-counter Ains. And so the 5 rested, going to be a Queen that comes down potentially. Maybe rethinking it, saying, you know what? Just a sec, let me really think about what I'm going to be doing off of this, and going to be playing that Queen, putting one back, drawing two, trashing one, going to be that Ains. They did find two non-counter cards, so they only have 1k counter in hand. So much non-counter exactly when you didn't want it in this one. Going to be getting a Dawn back to go up to 4 Dawn right now. Maybe honestly playing the Reiju at this point, but the problem with the Reiju is you have more Dawn than your opponent overall in this one, so it's not going to be effective in drawing cards at this point because your opponent has stayed at 5 overall. Going to be playing over the Reiju with that Raise Max, bottom decking the Raise Max, and then using leader effect, going to bottom deck that kid, now playing the Reiju. Now you're behind on Dawn and going to draw 2 cards. It's another Gordon. He got another Gordon off of that. Another just non-counter card overall. You did find a Reiju, so if there's a little 6k swing coming in, you will be able to at least get out of one attack, but other than that, you're just gonna have to use your blockers overall. And so swinging 7 now at lead, going to be interesting in where they go. Going to take that life. It's gonna be a Zorojuro at this point in there with 1 life left, so you gotta think, if you're the player on the left, do you go aggressive? Do you try to go for game with the 3 swings that you have left on the blockers? I would advise that's not a good idea, simply because they have 2 blockers on the field in the Shariah and the Queen. You don't really have a situation to be able to do what you want. And so playing the Gordon right there, the Gordon just kind of sitting there with the final Dawn. Now you only have 3 cards in hand as they go up to 8 Dawn, I think, if my math is correct, or 7, one of the 2 overall. They did draw an Ains, so no rush cards, no killer and kids and such for either of these players in this game. That could be so beneficial, really thinking about the distribution of their Dawn, where they want it to go right now. Maybe thinking about playing the Ains down from their hand. It would give you a rested, is it a rested or an active Dawn? Actually, a rested Dawn back in the field, and then when you use leader effect, doesn't really hurt so bad getting out of there. But gonna be swinging this 7 right here off of this Law, and going to be using the Queen blocker. So I think as the player on the right, you see that Queen get blocked and KO'd, and you're like, oh, interesting. So now swinging 7, getting a Dawn back as active. You've got 3 Dawn left to go in here with at least a 5k swing Shariah, right? Because the Shariah copies the Law, and then the Queen also being able to do a big swing. So really thinking about what they want to do. If you do swing with your blockers, though, you do open yourself up to be able to get KO'd in response overall, but you gotta think that you feel pretty good at this situation, swinging the 7 with the Queen. So the 7 with the Queen is going to provide one of 2 options, either a Eustace Captain Kid KO or counter out of the hand. And with no counter in the hand except for a 1k Reiju, it's going to be that Eustace Captain Kid block. And so the rest of the 2 Dawn going to be attached to the Shariah. The Shariah going to be copying the leader and then swinging a little bit extra. So we'll see if he actually does it, if he stops knocking over his cards. He's really thinking, is this it? You do have to realize, though, with those 3 cards, if this doesn't hit, you're probably losing the game at this point, right? You have a pretty decent shot to lose the game with the Reiju and also the Trafalgar Law leader being able to hit for bigger numbers, because they're going to be at 5, 7 Dawn, right? 7 Dawn, so you have to math yourself out of 2 of those cards. So going to be interesting, going to be attaching the 2, swinging for 7, and with only 1k counter, the player on the right is going to win that match. An absolute thriller. Really just a crazy game to watch overall. Really good. Don't go anywhere, because we will show deck lists from both players. They've been posted on OnePieceTopDecks.com, and I'll show you those here as we get into the part. Just gonna make sure real quick that they don't show any of the other matches that happened. So it looks like only one of the matches were decided right there, and it looks like there are still 2 matches to go. Remember, in a 3v3, you do have to win 2 out of the 3, and so look at this board from the Anel. Oh my gosh, with the 2 rush aces and a Katakuri as well, attaching the rest of the Dawn going into life. The Anel winning the game, and the team on the right winning. Oh, do they have enough counter? Wait a minute. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't think there's an Amaru in there at all or anything. No other shenanigans like that. So 8 is 13. What do you have here? You have Absalon, which is 1, 2, brand new is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 would be 14. He gets out of the swing. Overall, he gets out of the swing. So actually, I think the Moria won, right? The Moria won that game because he countered out 14 on a 13 swing. Let's go back. Let me just recount that real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 plus 5 is 13, and that was 14k counters worth. My goodness, the correct amount of counter in hand, just 1k off in general. What a crazy game. I wish we could have seen the end of that one as well. I mean, we kind of did in that one. So it's all up to the table in the middle. The table in the middle is going to determine who wins the 3-on-3 in this one, and could be really interesting in terms of showing the deck list overall. So are they going to show how it's going? It looks like the game is still going. At least we know that it's a black Luffy mirror, black yellow Luffy starter deck mirror. No, show the game, show the game. What are we doing? Show the game. Show the game. What are they doing? No, show the game. No. So it looks like actually the middle match was won by the team on the right. So it looks like the player that did end up winning the stream match his team ended up winning the whole thing, won 2 out of the 3. So we're going to show the deck list real quick. So first, we're going to look at the second place list real quick. This is the player that lost in the stream match. Overall, what I would call to be a pretty standard list overall. I think the only thing that I saw differently heading into this OP07 format was the importance of the Zorojuro. The Zorojuro, I feel like, is not something that we've seen a ton of, like in OP06 and then EB01. And so coming back into kind of the formula for OP07 is really, really nice to see overall, because I do think it's a really cool card, especially in this deck. Playing the Otamas, playing the Gordon Raise Max, a 4-4 combo, so rip your wallet if you're like me and you don't have any Gordons. Really just overall a clean list. Pretty much 4 of everything you see in here besides the 2 Otamas, kind of some of the flex cards. And then going into the winning list, this one is a little bit different. This one by the winner, opting instead of for Sanji's, going for the Miss All Sunday right here. 2 of the Miss All Sunday, and then instead of 4 queens, ending up playing 3 Otamas and doing a 3-3 split as well in terms of the difference on the different deck list. So that's going to be all for this video. Thank you again so much for watching. It was so nice to be able to watch this and have a little bit of fun and see a glimpse of the OP07 format. Next tournament that we do is going to be OP08, happening in the first weekend of June. So expect to see videos on that once OP08 releases. I'm excited to do that. There's a lot of interesting cards. I'm curious to see how the meta evolves, and again, we'll do, you know, the usual pre-format stuff for Japan as well. My best guesses as well, what I think is going to be good in there and whatnot. So thank you again so much for watching. I super appreciate you, and I hope you have a good one. Thanks.